Good morning. Another week.
And so much is happening. It's really hard to unpack, as we were discussing. There's so much stuff happening globally, financially, politically. The passing of the Queen, a session of a new British Prime Minister, who we'll talk more about that later. But we have to really get above all that stuff in terms of what's really happening. How do you make sense of this? What's your first idea we should talk about?
Well, I think to start with, what's been in the press the last couple of days has been how the Russians are getting beaten by the Ukrainians.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, the Ukrainians counterattacked with a 6-to-1 advantage.
6-to-1 ratio?
Yes,
wow.
Which means that they were pulling troops from somewhere else. It also means that somebody was directing them to do that. And the question in my mind is it Zelensky, who's desperate to show that he can, counterattack, that there's some hope that Ukraine can overcome Russia. But that means that they pull troops from other places. And if the Russians realize it, they could start overrunning those other areas. So it could be a trade-off in things. But the one thing we know is it's not going to change anything. The Russians aren't going to come to the table and say, okay, you beat us now, let's talk peace. And Zelensky won't talk peace with any part of Ukraine not being, back to its original.
What you're talking about in terms of pulling troops out from other areas, the Russians' strategic objective, is the eastern part of Ukraine and the southern ports, Crimea, and going off to Odessa.
This is a strategic area because it represents an area where they resupply. So, the Russians are going to take it back. The question is at what cost? I mean, every time we talk about this in military terms, the fact is people are dying.
Yeah.
And, in civilians and military. And where is it going? What is happening on the ground that's going to change anything there? If Ukrainians could defend their country and push the Russians out, fine, but they're not.
That's not going to happen.
So at this point, it's just moves without any real end-term strategy. He can't force them to the peace table. They can't force him to the peace table. We're in gridlock, and this could happen. This could go on for years.
Would that be like Afghanistan for Russia again?
It would be like Afghanistan, although a little bit different. I mean, the terrain and things like that was different. Here you have a situation where you have the rural areas, farmland, where it's easy to roll tanks over and things like this. And then, but the cities, those are really something because it's, as they found out, hand-to-hand fighting, block by block, it really can take a toll.
Well, as you know well, that the Ukrainians have been able to do what they've been able to do because of NATO support, basically European support. Will that support continue to be forceful?
Well, there's also the question that Russia is increasingly saying you're crossing the red line.
Yeah.
We are at war with another entity, another country, Ukraine, and you are feeding them arms that are killing our troops. At a certain point, this is the kind of thing that leads to escalation.
Will Europe break up because of this? Because I see this, Poland now is claiming territories all over the place.
Look, you have a weakened Ukraine. Everybody is saying, well, part of that territory, we could keep it safe for you. Ukrainians would be welcome as long as we can take the territory. The question is, where is the sense of national entity? I mean, you have the Eastern thing, which is the civilization state.
Right.
Very different from the Westphalian states, which were basically, religious in nature, 100 years war, literally, continually slaughtering each other until they got to the Treaty of Westphalia, where they just say, okay, this is the boundary line. On your side of the boundary, you do what you want. On our side of the boundary, we do what we want. But I don't interfere in you, and you don't interfere in me. That was only the only recipe to settle the intense religious wars. But the war in Ukraine is not religious. It really comes down to very similar people who are battling over a sense of security. For the Russians. For Ukrainians, it's their internal
Ukrainian, in terms of religion, they're closer to the Russian side, right?
Yeah.
Poland is basically Catholic.
Catholic, there still are some Russian Orthodox there, but mostly Catholic. It has to do with the historical factors and where different areas went. I mean,
Einar, looks like it will continue for some time.
Well, it's there's this thing about the Gordian knot.
Yeah.
This is the knot where you could see a ball of string, but every time you pull on one thread to try to unravel it, it just makes the ball tighter. And this is the situation we have. We have a global economy, a global political situation where you can't separate these things.
No.
Then you have all these historical narratives where they say, oh, that used to belong to me. I mean, I can't imagine what people in Ukraine are thinking when supposed allies like Poland is saying, well,
there's this chunk of land.
It's not just a chunk, it's a large piece.
Yeah.
That really belongs to us, and since we're NATO, we could protect it better.
So that territorial desire, let's just say, is one cause of intra-European conflict, but also the hard winter is going to be another one.
Well, this is, I think we agree with this. Governments are going to fall. Because when people are hungry and they can't heat their homes, they don't really care about anything else. I mean,
That's right.
Literally, they don't care. I can't feed my children and I can't keep them warm. I really am not interested in
taking
ideological
That's
things.
right.
I don't want the government taking care of other people
That's
when
right.
they cannot take care of me.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in what is happening in another country. If in my country I cannot eat and I cannot stay warm.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a bottom line issue. So if this is a tough winter and it all
points in that direction,
that direction, we're going to see real problems. But that gets back to something you were saying. It seems now that unlike previous crisis, where it was the global South, the poor, were getting hammered one way or another, right? Now it's developed countries. It's Europe, right?
It's Japan.
Korea.
Yeah.
South Korea. Since April, they have had a
trade
deficit. This is a country that is a powerhouse trade exporter. For 4 months now, they have had a trade deficit.
Germany, trade deficit.
So all of these powerhouses, but where is it going?
US of A, America is benefiting
this is the
from this.
friendshoring. If this is friendshoring, I don't need friends like this.
That's right.
I mean, South Korea has come out quite clearly. They're very unsettled by the idea that the U.S. is going into direct competition through subsidies for chip factories on one hand, and then saying, oh, we're friends. We should cooperate, Chip 4 against China. I mean, the hypocrisy of it and the double
it's unbelievable. Dealing. But it used to I think the U.S. used to get away with it because they had so much might. But Korea is very clearly saying, no way.
Threatening their economy.
That's right.
And when is Taiwan going to wake up to the fact that the same thing is happening to them?
That's right. But in Korea's case, it's very, very clear that they are objecting and they're not going to participate.
We meet with Nancy Pelosi.
That's right.
And it wasn't because she was going to Taiwan. It was because 6 days beforehand, she had passed this act, which was aimed at basically, taking down a good part of the Korean economy.
That's right. Hollowing out the Korean economy and wiping out over $40 billion of investments that the Korean chip companies have made in China.
Yeah, well, the Hynix guy said that the South Korean chip manufacturer who has plants in China said they want to expand in China.
That's right.
But now the issue is, how do you get the equipment in? So, I mean...
Yeah, speaking of which, latest word announced in the press, but it hasn't been formally announced yet. Lam Research, Applied Materials, the huge chip manufacturing equipment manufacturers have been informed by the Secretary of Commerce office that any equipment sold to China has to get their approval.
we talked about this last
Yeah.
time, this idea of putting a blanket ban on and then come beg me to, so that you can make money. I mean, Applied Materials, what, 30-40% of their business must be in China.
I think 80% of their business is in Asia.
Oh. Yeah, but a lot of that stuff is going to Japan, Taiwan, and Korea.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the markets are still China.
It's in China.
If you make a chip, it's not like that's the end of it. It has to go into a product. Where is the product made? China. So they're going to, reject all products from China, even if they have chips that are authorized from Taiwan? It's shaping up to be a direct attack on all of these economies. They're
allies of America.
Allies of America.
Yep.
So the U.S. is increasing the cost globally. Because in the U.S. they say, okay, we'll build factories. We'll have to import engineers to make it. We'll have to import engineers to run it. We're not willing to take Asians. I don't know where they're going to find these engineers. But above and beyond that, now they're going to increase the cost to allies because they say, I don't care, you make the chips, fine, but if you send it to China and they put it into a product, we're not going to take it. This is the direction it seems to be heading in. It's a full
at the macro level, deglobalization and the de-efficiency of supply chain means what? Inflation.
I know, but the strength of the dollar is a problem.
It's really incredible what's happened this time with the dollar. Because I remember the Asian financial crisis in 1998, 1997, 98, the collapse of the internet bubble in 2000, the 2008 financial crisis, all of which period we're actually seeing the dollar strengthened against developing countries. This time it's strengthened overall, but the real burden has been borne on EU,
Yeah, but
UK.
what you mentioned, 20% against major allied currencies.
Developed economies.
Developed economies.
Yeah.
Only 10% against developing emerging economies.
That's right. Look at Japan.
I think that reflects commodities a lot. I mean, oil to a certain degree, but also other things that are flowing in. But this really is shaping up to be, there's that movie, The Hunger Games.
Yes.
Where one state says, all of you pay tribute to me. And,
I think it's based on two things. One is the cost of commodities and the strength of the commodities. But the second part is blind following of we have the same values. In other words, the war in Ukraine.
If I say I have the same values, but I'm picking your pocket as I'm telling you to be.
That's what's happening. That's what's happening. The battle and the sanctions against Russia are now destroying the European economies. The industries in Germany and France and so on and so forth cannot continue.
I've seen a couple of articles that have been talking about who's winning on this. I mean, the stronger dollar.
Yeah.
Right now, that's going to kill U.S. exports. But in terms of importing anything, it's going to be a lot easier. And right now, their trade deficit is larger.
That's right.
So
what it means is, I think another part of this is those who jumped up and down the most in terms of sanctions against Russia, namely EU, UK, Japan, were the ones who were really suffering hard. I remember last time we talked about the Japanese yen, it was about 133, 134. Yesterday broke 144. This type of...
that's a massive swing. We're only talking about less than a month.
Yeah.
And there's no end in sight at the moment.
That's right. And the Japanese economy is really going to be hit very, very hard.
So we're seeing this division between north-south, between developing, emerging versus developed. But then within developed countries, you see the U.S. in essence cannibalizing
their friends.
Their friends.
And allies. Yeah. There's another ramification here, I think, in terms of this. Developing countries see this more and more clearly. The global South are seeing, what are you doing, Europe? You're committing suicide.
And they're not quite certain why. I think I've talked to some people and they think the Europeans have been manipulated through public opinion.
Yeah.
That their leaders actually understand the situation but feel powerless because of the emotional content that's being broadcast.
Common values.
Well, no, false dichotomies. You're either for the U.S. or you're for Russia. You can't be in between. There can't be a situation where you say, look, they're both at fault.
It seems like there are a lot of developing countries who say we can't be in the middle.
Well, they can be, but only China comes under dead scrutiny in that case. And talking of which, senior number 3 at the standing committee, Li Jianshu, has visited a couple of countries in the stands. And there's a lot of wondering. I mean, he's also going to Nepal. They're wondering what's going on. Then you have the situation with India, the SCO meeting coming up.
That's huge.
Well, and then Xi is going to be there. So is Modi. So is Putin.
That's right. And so are new applicants to join the SCO and
Iran.
Dialogue partners of SCO, the new dialogue partners. Saudi Arabia,
Egypt, interesting.
Yeah,
They're
interesting.
really, I mean, I've been reading reports that it is critical.
That's right.
Even as we speak, and it's only going to get
Food.
worse. Food, because they depend on the grains for breads. 80% of the grains are imported.
But you talk about the expansion of SCO. What that means also in terms of the expansion of collaboration among the Global South. What we're looking at is the possibility of real ramifications on RMB's internationalization. And we're also talking about regional organizations which run counter to what NATO stands for. NATO stands for beating up on other people. And this is for collaboration.
Well, they say it's defensive, but it seems very offensive to most people.
That's right.
Who are on the other
Including
side.
Yugoslavia. That was a NATO operation. The bombing.
But it's just not SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You also have BRICS that could easily double.
That's right.
In the next few years. At which point, you have all of the proactive, trade things. WTO is dead. U.S. won't appoint appellate judges. Right. So you have RCEP. Seems to be gaining a lot of traction. You have Belt and Road Initiative. Depending on the economic circumstances, up and down, but it's steady. Right. And you have CPTPP, which was the old TPP, which the U.S. walked out of. You have the BRICS, who are creating their own financing arms,
and trading
growing,
system. That's right.
and you have SCO. Not one of those is the U.S. involved in. Not one of those are the Europeans involved in.
No.
So you see this global South stands coming together for economic self-protection, trade, and
mutual benefit
things. And meanwhile, the bloc of Europe and America, we stand together. It's actually cannibalizing. One is cannibalizing the other. So you get the same sense too that there's this north-south divide that is growing larger by the day. And that, I think, is going to lead to what you're saying, the internationalization of the yuan.
The other part is, yes, there is a growing divide between the North and the South. At the same time, there's increasing cohesiveness among the South and increasing division among the North.
Dangerous times.
Very dangerous time. Yeah.
So, do you think there's going to be a meeting between, there definitely wouldn't be between Putin and Xi.
Right.
But I noticed that at...
The Modi one?
The Modi one is interesting. I mean, I appeared on an Indian television program, and the premise was, should Modi accept if the Chinese make an invitation?
Yes.
And I really didn't know how to respond.
How do you answer that?
Well, I said, I think dialogue is good unless you want war, right? And at the same time, both Chinese and Indian troops were mutually withdrawing from what they call the hot spring area in a very orderly fashion. And obviously, with SCO coming up with Xi and Modi in the same
this thing about
facility.
the face, from the Indian side to the Chinese, it just seems very, very awkward. Should Modi be invited to meet with?
Well, it's such a weird hypothetical.
It is.
Should I accept your invitation if you give me one? It sounds
That's
like
right.
you want an invitation.
That's right.
No, I'm not saying I'll accept, but he said, well, if you invite me, I might come. I don't know what that means. Or maybe I shouldn't come. It
sounds like arrogance.
Well, it was very interesting because you had three chaps on the things, and they were kind of sweet and sour on the issue. But one of them went so far as to say, why would Modi meet with Xi? He doesn't know anything about the situation on the border. And I found that very strange because this is a very much pro-Modi channel. But they were, in essence, questioning a hypothetical that if China invited them, why would Modi, if Xi invites Modi, why would Modi go to the meeting? There's been no invitation. It's just odd. It's very, very odd.
I like to look at it from the other angle, is that Xi will have to think about whether or not to meet with Modi if Modi does not issue an invitation.
Well, neither side can issue an invitation. The only way I can see this happening is if there's a joint things. If they
joint announcement.
Joint announcement, or Russia says, I think the three of us should get together.
Or the side room of the conference.
Side room where nothing's recorded. And it's, But, it would make sense. The U.S. is pressuring India to walk away from its relationship with Russia. And you have a very, very complex situation where India and Russia have been, for a long, long time, allies. 70-80% of all the munitions and defensive hardware comes from Russia. They have bought into the S-400, anti-aircraft missiles, things like this.
Much to the real displeasure of U.S. that they bought the S-400.
Whatever India does, the U.S. doesn't complain as much. It's a very different situation.
I read somewhere, it hasn't been confirmed yet, that the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the U.S. so far empty thing, the meeting of the ministers of trade, India decided not to participate.
Well, there isn't much Indo-Pacific if India doesn't.
That's right.
Want to things, but it tells me that there's a subtle shift going on. I think there's some sensitivity about criticisms involving their social system, especially Dalits and the caste system. Also, obviously, involving Kashmir. Yeah. So
ultimately, I remember in another program talking about India, but not with Indians. Fortunately for me, unfortunately for you, for you it was on Indian TV. For me, it was on I don't remember. I think it was Bloomberg or BBC, and I just put the question to this is somebody in Singapore, some research fellow in Singapore. My question is: does India choose to stand with the rising Asia, or choose to become a proxy for America? That's basically.
What was his answer?
He was stunned. Let's put it, I guess, too bluntly.
Bluntly, this is the problem with the world today. We're not answering the simple, blunt questions. No, but it's absolutely right. I've said similar things, but I enjoy being on Indian television for one perspective, and that is, they're not always very nice. They can be a little rude once in a while. They'll start off a question is, why is evil China, trying to punish wonderful India? I don't know if that's a question.
Why are they so aggressive to us?
Yeah, it's not always easy.
Now, another big issue.
Yeah.
This is very significant for China, but I think for Europe and the United States is longer-term ramifications. What is happening with COVID? You have your channels to HO experts and so on, because the impact on Chinese economy is significant. Of course, what happened in Shenzhen, once again, shows that the Chinese can address it. Shenzhen is now basically having it under control.
But they had 1,000 cases last week, and they about 26 million people have been locked down.
Yeah.
So it is having an impact. There's also fatigue. People are just saying, "Oh,
tired of it."
Well, a lot of it is, and my personal feeling is that they say, "Well, no one else cares. Why should we?"
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they really understand just how much death will happen of that. I mean, the U.S. longevity rate went down by 3 years in a matter of 2 years.
Yeah.
Now China is 1 year ahead. If China just opens up, it'll fall 2-3 years behind down. There is an impact to this, not only in terms of the death. People say, well, it's just elderly people and people have problems. I find that amazingly cavalier to just say, well, who cares? They're old. Well, let's
let them go, yeah.
I mean, is this the mark of a society? What was it said? A society should be judged not by how it treats those most fortunate, but those most unfortunate.
Yeah.
And
those most needing help.
Yeah. So, at this juncture, I mean, I do believe that China needs to get it to a way where within last 6 months, 60% of the population has been has had a vaccine or has had COVID itself. Those are the guidelines that are being sent out, that you really need to have booster shots. The question when it comes out, I noticed that they have a new nasal things where you can just ship. I'm really hoping that will make a big difference in people's acceptance of it.
I remember when we talked about this last year, at the beginning of last year, you were noticing that after a massive slowdown from COVID, there was a real V-shaped recovery, and the V was absolutely sharp. What I've noticed among the population here is that everybody's got this pent-up demand to travel, to spend, to consume.
We can confidently predict when COVID restrictions are released, Chinese are going to travel.
That's
in
right.
numbers, in places that they've never gone to before. I mean, everybody I've talked to has said, look, I have to travel. I said, well, it's going to be a little more expensive. I said, I don't care. For almost 3 years now, I haven't been able to go anywhere, and I want to go someplace.
Already, my flight last week to Zhuhai, I was in Zhuhai about a week and a half ago. I was shocked that Zhuhai, as you know, of course, borders Macau. Mm-hmm. The flight was completely full.
Really?
Not a single seat.
Wow. And they weren't going to Macau?
Some of them were, but not all of them were.
How are things with Macau? I know that you keep very close to that. I know the gambling revenues there.
In terms of Macau, the GDP is down over 60%, because any tourist to Macau, with the exception of mainland Chinese visitors, have to be quarantined. Now, you go to Macau for 3 days, if 3 of which are spent in a quarantine, you don't go. So it's all empty. Huge facilities. The Macau government has, I think it's had a total of about 800 billion in reserves, Hong Kong dollars. And just the last 2 years alone, in supporting the economy or unemployment or whatever, over 200 billion have been burned. So they say they can last another 3 or 4 years, but what are you going to do?
Well, there's no quick fix to this. They can't change their business model. It's still going to depend on people coming in.
Yeah.
It's not like they're going to start manufacturing in the near future. I mean, they have some stuff with shopping, but that once again is going to be impacted with COVID. So.
And then there's another aspect. The central government has been very keen on cracking down on using the casinos for money laundering, for capital flight. And hundreds of people have been arrested for conducting that. So,
well, they should be. I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
This is a mafia type of
Organization.
activities and organizations.
It is.
So you got to do that. I'd love to hear more about that happening in Europe and America. All you hear about now are drug seizures. Finding stuff at airports and ports, but where is the organized crime? I think they talk about white slavery. Where's the drive against prostitution? Where's the drive against these mafia type groups?
Or the drive to get to the root of it, which is money laundering. Well,
I'm talking about in the U.S. I mean, you just have
in the U.S.
Yeah. Well,
it's using cryptocurrency.
Yeah. And they say no, you shouldn't do it, but no moves. China saw it for what it was and said no, absolutely. That's right. And now the U.S. has walked away from that, but other than the Fed saying, this is not a good thing, and where's the action? Where's the meat?
Yeah.
All right. I'm just not seeing it anymore.
Now you are part European.
Yes.
What's happening to the UK?
Oh gosh, I went to school in the UK for 7 years.
Yeah.
Everything from a 2-room country school to a comprehensive, to what they call the public school, which is their elite private schools. All I can say is that, with the Queen passing, she was able and exemplary monarch. But the monarchy system is coming to a close. That's right. At least in Europe and areas like that. They have adopted other political means. Charles might be more activist. That could also lead to some things. But, I kind of wonder, here's the Queen who presided literally over Great Britain after the Second World War.
The sun setting.
The sun setting on the empire. And I kind of wonder what she makes of this kind of motley crew of prime ministers who came walking in to have tea with her once a week. I don't know, once a month, yes. And just, because she literally meets all of them, hears what they have to say. And, the last few years, from, before Cameron, what was that chap, the Liberal Dem?
Tony Blair.
Tony Blair. A lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. Followed the U.S. into Afghanistan, disaster, never really taken the heat for it. And then you had Cameron, who engaged in politicking. He started a referendum he couldn't afford to lose. And then Boris won the referendum he couldn't afford to win. And then you had May, who was kind of upended by the chicanery of Boris Johnson. And now Boris Johnson is gone, and you have, this Liz Truss. It seems surreal.
Absolutely.
Are these the best and the brightest that a democracy can create?
The best and the brightest the United Kingdom can produce. It's reached a point where, if you look at the numbers, right, over 10% inflation, people talking about 60% of the population of the UK will not be able to afford electricity this winter.
Well, Liz Truss's latest brain scheme is that she's going to limit the amount of aid, but no word. And this is a Tory. I would expect this from Labour saying we will cap it, we will stand behind the common man. He's just saying, well, you're capped, okay? But where's the money come from? Not even one attempt to explain how all of this is going to be paid for.
No wonder the pound is declining like crazy.
Well, would you have, is this the place you want to invest right now?
That's right. Yeah. And the latest I heard yesterday was that the university lecturers
are going on strike.
Are going on a 10-day strike.
It's strange. Yes, I
agree. It's really, really strange.
But it's not going to affect logistics, which the rail strike will.
It will.
Yeah. And that hits all this talk about how China is at the center of all the logistical problems. You have rail strikes in the U.S., dock strikes.
Dock
workers, transportation workers.
Truck drivers.
Nurses.
Yeah.
And they're going on strike. Yet there's no cohesive explanation for the kind of situations going on, other than it's inflation. It's not our fault.
But everything here, everything here will contribute further to inflation.
Exactly. I mean, this is the part, but I'm starting to see, I thought, there's no plan in the U.S. administration with all these moves to reshore everything, because it would just push up the prices. Now it's clear what they're trying to do is to make their allies, in essence, have to do the same thing. But that means that the rest of the world, the global south, the stands, Asia as a whole, they don't have to.
That's
Why
right.
would they? The money has, the markets have their own logic. Money is like water. It goes where the path of least resistance is.
And it appears now, in terms of middle class, Asia has a huge middle class now. The market size is far beyond the US and Europe added together now.
And continue growth.
Continue to grow.
ASEAN has outperformed the major economies the last, basically just a few years after the global recession.
I remember seeing a report with a major US think tank about the rise of the middle class of Asia, that the year to 2025, 82% of new entrants to the middle class will be from Asia.
It's economic gravity, and this is why I don't understand. You cannot literally shit on the markets that you need to live. I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, American businesses, they're not happy. They're here. AmCham is here. They're sitting in a situation where everything that they do is being put in peril by the administration's moves. But in the old days, business had a louder voice at the table. Today, no. I mean, they're really hamstrung. They're not able to get it. Now they're in the position where they have to go and beg, the U.S. government to give them a license to export so they can make money. The U.S. complaining about...
The logic there, Einar, I think is very interesting. Catherine Time. Her logic is that we do this, then we create a new chip for us to bargain with the Chinese on. It's absolutely ridiculous.
No, she's not creating a chip. U.S. companies trying to make money, that's a chip for the U.S.?
It doesn't make any sense.
No, and this is the problem that I have. I can't see the end game. And it's really becoming a problem.
Oh, your Scandinavian cousins.
Yes.
Sweden swings to the right.
Well,
much of Europe is swinging to the right.
And what's interesting is if you start looking at the global south, they're swinging to the left.
That's right.
So
all of South America.
Well, I mean, this is what I keep talking about, this fracture between North and South, developed versus emerging and developing. I mean, politically, they're getting further apart. Economically, they're getting further apart. They're really far apart on the Russian situation. And they're starting to feel more empowered with, RCEP, Belt and Road, all of these things. It really speaks to me of a massive change.
Interesting though, many Europeans, more sophisticated ones, are seeing the difference here. Our friend from the European Chamber of Commerce, he's been talking about how European governments, there are some very sophisticated forces talking about EU members joining RCEP. That would be very interesting.
It would be very interesting, but can you imagine the kind of pressure that would be coming from Washington? You saw the article about 5 hours of yelling and pounding the table.
Huawei 5G.
Yes, talking to cabinet ministers in Britain over the phone, 2 cabinet groups talking to each other, the U.S. insisting, in the end, if you don't give up Huawei, I don't care whether you think they're a threat or not. This is about hanging together. This is our special relationship. And if you don't do it, we're not going to share intel with you anymore.
That's right. Whereas the UK side, We checked everything. It's safe. Huawei is no problem.
I mean, MI5 and MI6 are not China's best friends. They're not
That's
going to be
right.
out there saying, oh, sure, it's good when it's not.
You're going to delay our rollout of 5G and cost extra billions of dollars.
Exactly, that we don't have.
That's right.
So expose it as completely political.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised, though, that Huawei did not avail itself of legal options in the U.S., especially with the mounting evidence that this was purely a political gut job and that they were just a pawn in a great power game between the U.S. and China.
It's all against the rules of international behavior.
Yes, but the U.S. says, oh, we're promoting all the international, the rule of law, the international norms, while they violate it. I mean, the hypocrisy, the post-truth, post-hypocritical world we live in, I am sometimes just completely floored when I hear these things and read them.
How hypocritical they can be.
Going back, Great Britain. I just want to ask, King Charles.
Yes.
Does he have what it takes to rule? Or is he going to imperil the monarchy?
Well, I think the whole concept of the monarchy in this modern world,
it's going away, especially in Europe. But he's been an activist. He's very, very set on a number of issues: historic preservation, climate change, animal husbandry, and he's very, very much on the ecological side.
Well, I think the politicians will follow him when they need to, but will not.
Well, they can't follow him. He's not allowed to get involved in politics. That's
in policy.
In policy. I just wonder. I wish him the best of luck. I really do. I mean, he has some. There was a lot of things in the things about him telling, I don't move things. Tell the servants to move them. Well, it's true. He can't get up and start moving things around and going. He's supposed to be signing a proclamation, and the desk should have been cleared. But things like that are rubbing people the wrong way. Mm-hmm. They see that, and they see elitism, somebody who's divorced from the realities, their realities, and I just wonder how it's going to go. I do wish him well. I do wish Great Britain well. I just am amazed that they're not able to come up with the leadership that they need at a time that it's needed most. Not only Sweden,
Canada too.
Canada, yeah.
Nut job.
Well, he's I mean, even Trudeau came out and took a swipe and said, "This guy is unbelievable." I mean, he's completely out there.
I think after President Trump's behavior, and now Zelensky, another actor.
Well, people would point to Bolsonaro and others out there that they say their things. I mean, Duterte was roundly criticized and things like that. But the populist politician, a movement among democracies, is still alive and strong. You still have people out there who are trying to convince them that black is white and gray is orange.
All of this is based on I think there is a cultural aspect of preaching, religious based.
Yeah, but there's no facts.
No facts.
Take it on faith. Believe in me. I will deliver you. I mean,
that's right. Use Clorox to rinse your mouth, and then you won't get COVID.
No, inject it.
Inject it.
Yes.
That will kill all the germs.
I just wish he had taken that to the next step himself. He prove it right. In the U.S., talking about abortion has taken a big shift. All of a sudden, the Republicans, a lot of areas that were going to impose these absolute bans, you see Republicans kicking back. And you see special elections where Democrats are getting in. So how far do you think the Republicans can flip-flop on this before their base says, wait a second, I thought you were with me, you're not, all right?
I think in this case, everybody's focus is on the impact on the midterm elections.
Yes, absolutely.
Because of the appeal of Roe versus Wade, there is a very strong segment of U.S. population on the left side, which have been really energized. And then the Republicans trying to do these things in the legislature, in the state legislature, actually added fuel to the fire.
Yeah, because now it's at home. It's not far away in Washington.
That's right.
this is my representative.
That's
with
right.
The majority of Americans feeling that this is the wrong thing.
The way things go, unless there is a real collapse of the economy or some other unforeseen event, I think the Democrats might actually win out in the midterms.
Well, there's some polling that's come out. Gas prices are down to $3 a gallon. There's more optimism among people. That speaks well for Biden. But we still have a few months to go.
2 months.
Talking about inflation, China's inflation actually dropped from 2.7 to 2.5.
Yeah.
And also the producer price index went down. That, the money that people have to spend in order to get the materials and everything.
PPI. I think what's very interesting in terms of last month is over the course of last 8 to 10 months, you had inflation rate staying at around 2 to 3 here. Producer price index went like this. But last month was when they crossed. They crossed. So, in other words, I think potential business confidence is going to increase because it becomes more profitable when your PPI goes down.
That's one of the things I always harp on with China is the expectation of return is much less. It's whole points. American companies won't go into anything unless there's at least 8% return.
A profit,
Yeah, a profit. Chinese companies, depending on how large the order is, they'll go down to 2, 2.5%, 3% if it's really large, like Foxconn.
Or major SOEs may go down to negative profitability if the society needed it.
Well, and that's really one of China's ace in the hole when they start dealing with this global situation. If they have to do it, they'll do it. Be done. There's no court case. There's things like that. Now, on the other side,
no shareholder lawsuits.
Yeah, well, they're the shareholders. That's a little easier. But there's always it works during times of crisis. But SOEs have been steadily declining in terms of the nation's GDP.
Now, it made me remember something that I was described. Somebody described to me, Vladimir Yakunin.
Oh,
Russian Rail.
Well, you have to explain this. Yeah. This is the guy with the head of Russian Rail.
Chairman of Russian Rail.
And he really saw himself as the
employment agency.
Yeah, because if employment was down, he hired.
He had more people.
He let people go.
Russian Rail is a huge operation. Yeah. I think millions of people depended on its activities for their livelihood. And he was joking to me about this, and he said that basically, we serve as a cushion for the government's employment policy because we can quickly employ more people or quickly let go of more people. And so,
I mean, a lot in the West, this idea that economic policies are preeminent, all right, that once you have the economic policy there and you implement it correctly, all people's problems should go away or be minimized to the extent that they can be.
Solved by the market.
Solved by the market. That's the magic.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're starting to see a completely different idea that it's not possible, that the market doesn't solve things. It just, you careen from one cycle to another, crisis after another. And, as you were pointing out earlier, you're going through all the financial crises, and it seems like every few years there is going to be one. But China has been saying, this, very clearly that it's human-centered policies where economics are used as a tool, not as this
the leading guiding force.
The guiding force.
Yeah, we have a very clear example. We talked about this. You've been in Beijing for a long time. You remember what it was like when PM 2.5 was 700, 900, and so on, right? In Beijing. And all the talk about environmental protection and ESG and so on.
People were leaving. And
That's right. All this ESG stuff is using the market forces to address the environmental issues, right? Did it happen? No. It happened because of the government's forceful policies, concentrated effort, and coordinated, concentrated, and absolute strength in implementation that we now have the blue skies in Beijing. It's not because of market forces. If you're dependent on market forces, who's going to increase their...
Even in America, remember LA during the 70s?
Ah, yes.
Gray LA day because there was no sunshine.
That's right. It's all pollution.
It was all pollution.
Yeah.
It wasn't the market that solved it. It was policy.
Exactly.
That said, look, you have to do this and that. And that started California on this road towards, a sustainable
I remember when there was policies which were implemented that required cars sold in California actually are of a different standard than cars sold elsewhere in the country.
I remember that also. That? And they couldn't take the same, they would
gasoline.
They would not burn leaded
That's gasoline, yeah.
Yeah. And then the formulation itself, and they're also, but I mean, California has been on the leading edge, but it hasn't been through market forces. Mm-hmm. It has been through policy.
That's right.
And policy has there. I mean, it's quite clear to me that unless you have the policy, you can't just hope that things are going to work out.
That's right.
Because they're not.
That's right.
Yeah, there's been no positive change anywhere that I've seen without it. Now, the mechanics of the market, I mean, the mechanics of, people competing and things like that, yes, definitely. Capitalism, competition works at the lower level, but it's not an ideology.
That's right.
It's just a means.
And in terms of the ideology is profitability, right? And profitability means lowest cost possible. Now, if it means using unleaded gas, they would prefer to use unleaded gas.
But I want to talk about one of the ironies we're talking about. We know people who run major oil companies.
Yes.
And they're complaining. They said, when we were losing money and we had to pay people to take oil. I want to talk about a hypocrisy that just baffles me. So oil companies lost money during, when we were paying people to take oil because they didn't have anywhere to store it. Now they're making huge sums, obscene amounts of money. But instead of saying, oh, those are the market forces, you have governments now imposing windfalls, taxes. Isn't that the same thing as regulating, as having a state-owned enterprise? You can, except in this case, they don't even have to support it when it's down.
That's right.
That goes to the shareholders. But when things are up, we have to step in.
It's all a question of how do they define market forces, right?
Well, this is the thing.
Hypocrisy.
Exactly. And I mean, it's so glaring. And you were saying earlier that, around the world, these increasingly sophisticated leaders from the global south and the stands, he's saying, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. These people are just making it up as they go along. It's only good if it's good for me.
That's right.
It doesn't matter about principle. It doesn't matter what I say, what I preach. It's just my own naked self-interest.
And especially, I think the focus is on naked self-interest of America.
But it's not even hidden. Make America great again. America first.
That's right.
All right? Reshoring.
That's right.
I
hollow you out to fill me up.
I'm going to support you politically, but economically I'm going to destroy your economy.
That's right. To have the Ukrainians killed to the last one.
Oh, we're willing to sacrifice every
Ukrainian.
In the principle of justice. Will you send Americans?
No.
It's not that important.
But I think the problem with the Europeans is that they keep on thinking about this common value thing. Common values, we're together, we stand together, But it's not common values if they're in essence being used. And they accept it.
All right. Let's have something positive. Can you think of anything positive that happened? Other than those firefighters in China and the people who supported them in Chongqing when these blazes were going on and they were moving them up the mountain?
Well, no. There's one thing which is very positive, which I was really surprised by, is the Chinese population's contribution to Pakistan's crisis.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
There was an appeal put out by the Pakistan
Embassy,
that raised so far 20 million?
Over 20 million RMB. And it's basically by the young people in China, 200 here, 300 there.
And this is one of the reasons why, I always tell people, don't underestimate each generation as it comes along. They might not think the way you do, but it doesn't mean they don't have feelings, that they don't have empathy.
Sense of justice.
Empathy.
That's right, empathy and sense of justice.
These are moments when you see that.
These are also moments that you see that more and more of them, 10 years ago, might worship the United States, are now no more.
Well, it's just the blatant hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Everybody
in the world see it, except the Americans themselves, it seems.
Well, it's the story of the emperor's new clothes. The emperor is led by charlatans into believing that if you can't see the clothes, then you're not worthy.
That's right.
And the U.S. is trying desperately hard to convince the whole world that it's not a naked beast. It's clothed in the finest embroidered policy and doctrines that are available.
Yeah.
Too bad. Well,
so hope next week we'll have more positive things.
Let's hope so. Good to see you as always, my friend.
Good to see you.